Hello, and welcome to Informatically Speaking, a Greater Delaware Valley ANIA podcast designed to promote knowledge sharing in the field of nursing informatics, locally, nationally, and globally within our unique industry. At GDV ANIA, we are committed to providing opportunities for professional development with the goal of advancing nursing informatics practice. I'm your host, Constance McLaughlin. In today's episode, we are speaking with Karen Hunter. She is a System Vice President of Clinical Informatics at Common Spirit, has a long history and career in informatics. Karen, welcome.
Thank you, Connie. Glad to be here. Constance, sorry, glad to be here.
That's okay. Yeah. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a nurse by background, and I worked at the bedside for 9 years and then went into management with the goal of fixing all the system issues in healthcare. And while I was a manager, I implemented my first EHR, which was amazing and just really impressed with the technology. And then unfortunately had a fatal medical error. Was working on a cardiothoracic step-down unit, and we had a 17-year-old girl come in and was transplanted with heart and lung. However, the donated organs were of an incompatible blood type. And it was a profound experience for all of us involved. I knew the surgeon, I knew all the nurses in the OR. It was just overwhelming. And we were on the cover of Newsweek, we were on 60 Minutes. It was just like walking the gauntlet to get into work every day for a little while. But we learned from this, our organization did a great job. It was Duke University, did a great job of looking at a system approach and how did this error occur? And it really taught me the value of that system approach. And it struck me that this, and all the data points that you think about in a transplant situation, this one piece of data was overlooked. And I thought, how can technology help us be better, be safer? So then I looked, our Duke University at the time had a program, a nursing informatics master's. I went back to school and never looked back. And subsequent to that, I graduated. I co-founded a startup focused on nursing documentation mobile devices. Did that for 3 years, learned a lot, and we weren't able to make it fly, but still loved the concept. And then went down to Georgia and created our informatics team there for the first time in Savannah, Georgia. We implemented Epic, achieved meaningful use, all those things, and then was recruited out to California to work for Dignity Health. And then in 2019, Dignity Health merged with CHI to form the second largest Catholic health system in the country. And opportunity in the national office arose. So I took that, and here I am.
Wow. Well, I could never sum that up eloquently through a bio or anything, but I think it's always so interesting for others to tell their story. So thank you for that. I think it's great. But today, you and I spoke before this, obviously, and we talked about your unique perspective, your unique view. Not only at the leadership level, but just your trajectory, your career trajectory, and all of the experience that you've learned along the way, I think always prepares us. But also, I think that today we're going to talk about mergers. And it's really commonplace now to hear it, see it, feel it, experience it. And you do have some great insights. And I think, and hopefully today we might dispel some myths and kind of take a little bit of a deep dive to help others that may be in that same position right now, or learning that it's going to happen to them, to help them maybe navigate, because this is a huge disruption. in not only our professional lives, but our personal lives too. And you've been through it a few times now. So I'm thinking that maybe we should start with some crucial elements around this type of situation.
So there's mergers and there's acquisitions, right? And what's the difference? A merger is two organizations of somewhat equal breadth and depth who decide to join forces and become one company, a marriage or so forth, if you will, to achieve benefits. An acquisition is more common, and it's where a single entity or much smaller entity is acquired by a larger organization. And I think there's some key differences. Um, One is that in the acquisition, you tend to take the identity of the acquiring body, right? So usually it's established company and that sort of thing. So you take that identity. And I think if you're in the acquisition, you're a little more prepared. Like, okay, we're changing, we're now becoming X. In the case of a merger, it's a new identity, right? It's a new company. And it's not so clear cut who's in charge, who's making decisions, that sort of thing. You have to come together and kind of reinvent all of that.
Right.
So,
And you would think too, culture change, right? Even with both
mhm.
merger and acquisition. Talk a little bit about your experience with a shared vision between, because even if you are merging, there still needs to be an alignment, right? So even if you're not being acquired and you're assuming a new identity and you're assuming a new everything, and culture as well. So talk a little bit about what the importance of that shared vision and how to navigate through that as well. And how does that really align with the informatics work?
It's true. And many organizations, and ours did this, to do an assessment ahead of time, right? What are the cultural values of each organization, from the mission, the vision, and so forth on down, and even did an employee survey. I remember taking the survey and looking at where were we aligned. It's interesting from a nursing informatics perspective. We both organizations had large nursing informatics organizations and strong leaders. The key difference for me was that, and this could happen anywhere, when one organization had a centralized model of informatics and the other organization had a decentralized model. So both are valid, right? Both are, and so that was the biggest challenge as we came together as one team. And I remember getting into meetings, and I was so used to, my organization was centralized. So I was so used to top-down decisions, come together, we make, reach a consensus, move on and do it. On the other side of the house, like, well, that's your opinion, but we're going to do what we're going to do. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way. It just, was very decentralized, very accountable to the market, and took my input as, a recommendation that they could consider and not necessarily. So learning to lead more by influence. So I think, and so we found a lot of diversity in nursing informatics, how it's practiced, what the role and responsibility is. And even 4 years later, we're still kind of teasing that out, and how, what does this mean in our organization?
That's interesting that you say influence, because that's something that I found I needed to learn. I think in my past life, even though it was over a decade that I functioned in a consulting type of role, you learn the ins and outs of how to influence. So it's interesting you say that. And funny, in another vein, we're working on a podcast, and who knows if it's going to be before you or after, but we're working on actually influencing behavior. So we're doing a series on that as well. So you'll have to listen in on that one. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so I mean, it's fun too, right? I love doing
Mhm.
these podcasts. These are great. So for most of us, we're on the receiving end of this merger and acquisition. But again, you were in a leadership position. You are in a leadership position, so you were able to see it, I think, from a little bit of a different perspective. Let's talk a little bit about the different aspects that we may not consider. Like, what are some of those challenges? Um, and I have the case study that you provided me on this integrating a merger of equals out of the Harvard Business School. It's a really interesting case study. And you and I had talked a little bit about what the challenges are. So why don't we talk a little bit about the operational and decision making aspects of all of that, and just from that leadership perspective, so those who are listening can understand. Like I said, we're usually on the receiving end, and we're going, okay, well, this is happening, but what's it like to be a leader in all of that?
Sure. I think really important to think about the why for the merger. And our organization was very clear. It was to maximize value, right? And you can make all the forces today on healthcare and reimbursement changes. Now we have to generate outcomes and do it, at a cheaper cost. And most the aging population needs that we're mostly looking at Medicare for reimbursement, and they always reimburse less than it costs. I shouldn't say always, but primarily. And so again, we have to do things better, cheaper, more efficiently. And so keeping that in mind. But I also read in the literature that does not automatically happen. Just coming together and forming a company. You have to be very deliberate and reimagine how you work together. And I think as a leader, where I struggled was getting my teams to let go of the old. Just say it's done, it's over. We are now this new company. We're married, right? We can't go home every night anymore. We have to stay, with our, new spouse and work this out. We have to argue, even if we disagree. We have to argue until we get it right and understand each other. And so the fact that a lot of people still felt like they could opt out, like this merger didn't really affect them, instead of coming together and really looking at how do we work better together. And some of those key things you've alluded to, how do we make decisions? Who has decision rights? We're still struggling with that 4 years later. And, people make a decision, think we've made a decision, think we had all the right people in the room. And then we find out, oh, we missed this person over here. And they're saying that it's not a valid decision. And we're redoing things. Another key thing for informatics is the electronic health record. We have roughly, I think, depending on which day of the week you look, it's 17 to 22 different EHRs across our company. How do we choose which one to use? How do we, and we have multiple instances, right? So even though we may have one particular brand or vendor in a couple of our states, they look different and act differently. And so how do we support those? And I have one division that swears by e-learning, best way to teach. It's asynchronous, real time. People can, gets people to the floor faster. And then I have another division like absolutely not. Nobody learns that way. The best thing is classroom. So how do we come together and make these decisions that have the potential to impact our value proposition? So those are key things. Even where does informatics sit? Do we sit in operations? Do we sit in IT? Those were big decisions early on that had to be made. And as a leader, I was privy to a lot of that.
And it's just mind-boggling. So the audience won't be seeing us, but we're seeing each other, right? And I keep thinking, how do you keep your cool? It all comes down to experience, right? And it's a daily thing. It's a daily discussion. How do we work through this? How do we make these decisions? But it's the sheer enormity of just the few things that you're talking about right here just boggles my mind. It's just so much work. it is so much repetitive motion and
Yeah.
discussions. And how do you decide on the EHR? How do you decide whose governance works better, right? Those folks who know me know that I normally I don't go without saying the word governance in a EHR conversation for very long. But when you have two organizations that are coming together, they're they're definitely going to be functioning differently, right?
Right.
From the governance perspective, whether they have the same EHR or not. I mean that alone. And I think you and I worked together for a short time, and I know that there was some
Yes.
struggle with that process as well. Have you all come together? I mean, that was quite a few years ago too. So have you all
Yeah.
come together on that yet? On governing your data, governing your EHR process? No?
No, I can't tell you how many hours we've spent in a room trying to figure that out. We've mapped out great processes and we've got a lot of great theories, but we have yet to um, actually implement a standard governance process.
Wow. Amazing. It's
Mhm.
amazing. So at one point, we had talked a little bit about the EHR decision for one or
Mhm.
not. And you were talking a little bit about pros and cons
Mhm.
to all of that. Can you share a little bit about what those conversations look like? I mean, you're
Sure.
still not on one EHR yet.
Correct.
But so talk a little bit about leadership's thoughts on pros and cons and working to ultimately leverage what they actually have. I mean, earlier you talked about value.
Absolutely. It's like, where is the value? And you have
Mm-hmm.
different schools of thought, right? So, on the one side, from an IT perspective, one instance, one vendor, so much easier. You can, take care of it. Simplifies the IT burden and skill set needed. We just have this one instance we're taking care of, building it the same way. On the clinical side, it is considered not as valuable because people are all about their workflow and their patients, right? They just want EHR that meets their needs in their moment wherever they are. But it's critical care nurse, primary care physician, seeing patients, ED provider. They need what they need and they're used to what they have. And so there's a cost associated with us coming in and changing that, affecting their workflow efficiency. And so trying to balance those two things. And again, with the driver being value. So you look at it in that, right now we're okay. Right now we're able to meet the needs of our patients, drop a bill with 22 different EHRs, right? Why change? And so trying to make that case and look at, what is the ROI over, 5 years, 10 years, and is it worth it? And in a time when many healthcare organizations are cash poor, right? We don't have money sitting around to make this change and invest in it right now, without a really clear, compelling ROI. And then how do we agree which vendor, which system? Um, and then, there's this grandiose idea that we'll standardize associated workflows and associated clinical content. But again, that speaks back to that decision making that we still haven't gotten it down yet. And so maybe we go to one vendor, but do we recreate 22 different instances because that's how we live today, to keep everyone comfortable. So it's lots of variation there and trying to see where is the true value. And it's a tough call.
It is. And I can't even imagine having to make decisions about 22 different 22 different EHRs. Holy cow. That's a lot. So, you're we talked about value and, of course, sure, in the grand scheme of things, leadership needs to make decision about their finances, how they're dealing with this. And my very first thought is when you were speaking last, I was just thinking, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So, I mean, it sounds that that's kind of the way that's going right now. But then how do you create where's the opportunity for innovation then? Because right now you're a little bit stuck, right? I mean, maybe you're not stuck, but there's so much going on and there's so many variations. And even if you do have the same EHR, there could be, like you said, there's several instances depending on where you are. So how do you, as an informaticist, because we all we never let go of it, right? No matter what
Mhm.
role we're in, if you're still at the bedside, and or in a leadership position like yourself, you still never let go of that mindset, that informatics mindset. So how do you even think about innovation? How do you even have the presence of mind to say, okay, we can move forward, or we let's think about these types of innovations with all of this different technology that's swirling around?
Yeah, you're spot on, and it's a challenge that it comes back to some of the value proposition. So between informatics and IT being stretched so thin across maintaining these 22 different instances, and it may not be 22, but it's up there. It's just maintaining takes all of our energy and time. And then one of the things we struggle with as an organization is getting meaningful data out of these systems. So for our, national leadership to review and know what's going well, what's not. Um, and so that's one big thing. And then innovation, if you think about, it requires risk, right? It requires the ability to fail, right? Because you have to put yourself out there when you're innovating and see if something can work.
Sure.
We've struggled, I think, in this area with scaling. That was actually a big factor at the time of the merger. There were several isolated or pockets of excellence, I would say, with we call them bright spots. And the idea was we're going to scale these across, but because the workflows, technology, and all are so different, we've really struggled to scale. And so that limits our ability to truly innovate. And back to the original thing of our company as a whole, finding value. Again, pockets around are doing great things, but not really scalable because of the disparate technology, inability to make decisions together, that sort of thing. Really, really a challenge. And I don't mean to be so gloom and doom at all.
No, you're
It
not
is
at all.
the potential is there. The potential to do something great is really there. We look at our competitors and think about HCA or Tenet or Providence, and I think they've just been at it longer, right? They've had more time to make these decisions to come together,
Mm-hmm.
and right now they're doing better in many of these areas. So we can look to them to learn and emulate some of what they're doing, some of their innovation. I know Dr. Jane Inglebright from HCA was a key speaker in my doctorate program, and she spoke a lot about their data standardizations, particularly nursing data standardization, and her vision for that. And just amazing. And I look at that and I think if we could do that, we could really accomplish more and position ourselves for innovation. So I think, you innovate or die, right? We've got to figure this
Right.
out and get there. So we will. But all these founding blocks that we've talked about in terms of decision making, EHR standardization, culture alignment, those things all have to be lined up to really, I think, truly have effective innovation and then scaling that innovation.
There's just so many aspects to the challenges of your day, of your daily work. Um, and I keep thinking about, so, all of these, really, these different cultures coming together. And when I think about common spirit, it's not only the two companies that came together, it's really all of those different ministries across America, right? That have been coming together over time. So there's those little pockets of culture that are everywhere. It's no different. They're part of that whole the whole merger, the whole acquisition. Let's talk a little bit about those different cultures. So you said centralized, decentralized, but let's get a little bit deeper into how that is coming to be over time, because you did have to deal with those two separate cultures of centralization and decentralization. So talk a little bit about what that felt like, how you could be collaborative and not territorial. How were you able to help each other? And how did you ultimately come together? Are you centralized now?
No. No, we have a national office, and then we have market based teams. So, and so we work together very closely. I think it's interesting that, going back to the original two companies, the biggest cultural difference I think was one was a operating company with the expectation that everybody would align and do it the same way. The other was what's called a holding company, where there were just a collection of, as you said, separate entities that continued operating however they, had before, right? Again, neither one is wrong. There's pros and cons, and it's just how the two companies were. So to me, that was the biggest difference. And so coming together, and I, came from the centralized team, and then was put over into the decentralized area. I was the first one over on the other side, and got to meet very amazing people. So, I'm just always impressed with informaticists. I always joke with my team that informatics never, you just never fall off a truck and become an informaticist, right? You years of education and experience that build into this role. And so, again, amazing people, smart people, and working hard, but just a very different perspective on, I know who the key players are in my facility, in my market, and that's who I listen to, and that's who I am going to gear my work towards. Recognition of a national standard, just considering it a recommendation. And so coming in and pulling them together and developing relationships with them. I started 2 years ago, and I think we've made great progress coming together and just getting them to appreciate each other. There was a lot of competition prior to that, but coming in and saying, no, we're all informaticists. Let's all come together. We all have great ideas, and let's learn from each other. And each of these teams was by themselves trying to solve the same problems, rolling that boulder up the hill with, by themselves, like coming in and say, look, we all have this boulder. Let's figure out together how we want to do it. And it's worked really well. And people have started to really appreciate that, reaching now across, talking to each other, whereas before they didn't. And then we're starting to stand up some centralized functions like sharing training resources across markets. And at first, they're like, we can't do that. We don't know their particular EHR. We don't know. It's like, well, it works the same, pretty close, pretty close. Clinical care is clinical care. So, coming together, and they were able to figure that out and kind of rewrite the curriculum, work together. And it's very exciting to see that happen. So we've got some of these pockets where we've demonstrated we can do that. And we're setting up the governance. We're not there yet. And we've drafted it. We've come together and agreed in principle, we're going to do this. We just haven't officially started yet.
Well, I get that. And I'm thinking about my own situation and where I'm working, and it's very similar to bringing everyone together, right? And sharing resources and things like that, because there's something to be said for being in a market, you're doing your thing, you're humming along, your team has the synergies and the everything feeling great. And you forget that you have others in other markets to reach out to that, and unless you come together often, you forget that, right?
Mhm.
So even if you don't work in a large corporation like this, you still have others that you can reach out to. And that's the reason why we have these chapters, right? So
Absolutely.
to make sure
Absolutely.
that we are networking and, we're not only hearing from leaders like yourself, but we can reach out to others and say, hey, what do you do? What does your company do? Or what
Mhm.
what what does your healthcare system do in this situation? And I think it's just so valuable, and people forget that they have that they can reach out to people, or just reach out to somebody and say, hey, do you know someone who can help me in this situation? It's just so valuable. And I think just maybe staying on that theme, we'll start to come into a landing here. And for a landing, we talked about leveraging the opportunities for innovation. I want to just talk a little bit too about that standardization, customization, the little bit of uncomfortable stuff going on there. And it really is it's a huge deal. Not only for informaticists and using their influence, right? Um, but the staff as well. So my thought process at the moment is standardization and customization within, of course, the technology that we're using.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little bit about how we can use our influence to bring our clinical counterparts together to help us in that area and to really see the value in standardizing so that the technology isn't such a hindrance to them, that we can actually apply it everywhere. If we did a little bit of standardization work, there's that we've always done it this way scenario. And of course, the culture that allows it to continue, right? So, can you talk a little bit about how that worked in your organization, or even just in your experience, working toward that standardization, and maybe I'll say localization versus customization?
That's a good way to put it. Yeah. I think we've had great nursing leadership to pull together and establish early on a nursing practice council, a nursing professional practice council. And they did a great job of not trying to eat the elephant at once, right? They did a great job of piece by piece. Let's come together, representation from the various localities and specialties, and together deciding, how our nurses. I know our CNO came out and said, we're going to have common spirit health nurse. What does that look like? And so we've gradually worked that way towards key standards like fall risk tools,
Mm-hmm.
assessments, behavioral health screening, things like that, admission assessment. COVID helped, like many organizations, accelerate how do we reduce and minimize, the charting. So we leveraged that. So I think that set a great example for us to start, but it's just barely, to me, the surface, and we still have leaders that dedicated to what they're doing, but I guess, asking for specifics. I think for me, where I want to see informatics grow in our company is to become recognized expert with a unique body of knowledge that we can offer the organization. We still kind of show up more on the, put a ticket in and get this change made for me, rather than an expert of saying, how does the EHR support practice? at our organization. And that's where, we're striving to still. And I think this audience probably grapples with the same thing constantly. I'm really looking this year to grow our team more in the space of being data-driven. I did my doctoral work on value capture in optimizing an EHR. And so before we go in and make these changes, whether they're specifically local or standard, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What are the metrics that show that problem? What's the evidence of that problem today? And then what will success look like? And then circling back, did we make a difference? And did the EHR really help promote care? And I think that's how we get to winning that debate. It's winning maybe too harsh, but becoming those experts, recognized expert. We have that evidence to support. Here's how the EHR supports your practice. Here's how the EHR makes patient care safer. All those things we strive for, but I think we just haven't quite manifested yet.
Well, Karen, you hit the nail on the head, because everyone struggles with that, I think. And it's been years and years, right? 30 years we've been a profession in our own right as nurses. And you're exactly right. We are still working toward that. What is the value that we're providing, and really get it pushed out there, because that is something that I think about every day as well too. So I thank you so much for your time today. I'll put another plug in for this case study. It's really interesting read. Great work, and so great talking with you, Karen. I hope you come back and visit us again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Constance. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and an honor to be on the program.
Until next time. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you'll join us again for another session of Informatically Speaking.
This has been a production of the Greater Delaware Valley chapter of the American Nursing Informatics Association. For more information about the GDV-ANIA chapter, visit us at community.ania.org/Greater Delaware Valley/home.